Hello friends, welcome to Next Level Twig. We've got these slides and some other resources that I'm going to cover during the talk are available on the camp website on the session page for that. So we're going to talk about getting some extra functionality out of your Twig templates to let you really control what Drupal's doing when you render your content. I'm Will Long, based out of Chicago, co-founder of MyDropWizard, joined up with Dave Elliott. We do support and maintenance on Drupal 6, 7, and 8. We also recently built a Drupal 8 Civi CRM platform. You can come talk to us about that. I also work as a Drupal consultant, doing mostly back-end development and all sorts of other things. You can find me on Twitter and Drupal.org. Karasai is the username. Really the impetus for this talk is to get around some of the limitations of the Twig templating system. And we're going to talk about how to get around them. A lot of things we could do in Drupal 7 with the PHP template system is really not possible with the default implementation of Twig in Drupal 8. They're not necessarily issues with how Drupal's doing it. It's just some holes that are there, and there's some tools that we can use to fill those voids. So the actual limitations that we run into, a lot of them have to do with just lack of access and freedom to access different pieces of Drupal that would really just be beneficial to us in our templates. For instance, you can only render values that were passed directly to the templates. There's no way to get at any global data or any access any other contextual information about what's going on with your Drupal site. Just whatever's in the templates, what you got. Even when you're passing a class, say a node, for instance, into a template, there's only a limited set of methods you can even call off of that entity as well. And then another limitation is we see a lot of overly complicated logic within the Twig templates. We've got conditionals and looping and whatnot is possible, but a lot of that can get pretty complex fairly quickly in the Twig templates. And then we also see a lot of those same conditional sets and different pieces of logic and functionality duplicated across many templates. So those are some of the limitations we run into. So the way to get around those is to use Twig Extensions. And primarily this is adding filters and functions to your templates. In my speaker notes here, I wrote that I should skip this slide. So this is talking about tags. This is a syntax you see in the templates where there's an opening and a closing tag, and the Twig Extensions provide some functionality that those will provide for you. That's a little beyond the scope of what we're discussing here, but that is an option. You can add functionality similar to that if you wish to embark on that. So yeah, the main things we're talking about is filters and functions. If you've been working with the Twig templates, you've definitely seen these before. The filter is this context here where we've got a value, and then we've got a pipe, and we're passing it on to the filter. And then the function is this other syntax we're seeing where we've got the function name, and we've got some parentheses and some arguments passed to the function. So Core provides a handful of filters and functions. These are the ones that are provided by Core. They're all fairly self-explanatory. And it also provides a function as well. These are a little less self-explanatory, but still, if you've been working with Drupal, you should be able to figure out what these are. And then in the contrib space, there are also some valuable tools there that we can use to get filters and functions available to our Twig templates. The most popular one is probably the Twig Tweak module. It provides a handful of filters. These are all fairly self-explanatory also. You can see it actually even includes our nemesis, the PHP filter, so we can execute PHP from our templates. Luckily, that's disabled by default. One of the things I started messing with the Twig extensions specifically was for this image style filter. So only recently, after I had produced the talk, they actually added that to Twig Tweak, but I've implemented the same thing a few times, allowing you to access a file, an image file, through the image style system. So if you wanted the thumbnail, you could pass it the file and tell it you wanted the thumbnail, and it would produce the link to the thumbnail image. Then we've got a couple other things in here. The check markup runs through text filters, and then the view can view an entity or a field on an entity. So Twig Tweaks has a bunch of functions also. Some of these are very similar to the filters. They are implemented with basically the exact same code on the back end, just a different syntax to use them. So it's got functions for inserting views. This first one, you can literally drop a view right in your Twig templates. You can place various blocks and regions throughout your templates and things like that as well. And then also, not provided by Twig Tweak specifically, but I believe it's the devel module provides a tag that will let you actually put a breakpoint into your Twig template so you can see what all your variables are in the middle of the template. One of the other contrib options is the Twig Extensions module. This is a Drupal module that actually integrates the Twig Extensions library into Drupal's Twig system. So the Twig Extensions is a project that's widely used across PHP. It's got 20+ million downloads. Provides functions to deal with arrays and some dates and some different internationalization type stuff. So if you need to be able to integrate with any of that stuff, the Twig Extensions module will help you do that. So that's all stuff that's already available for us, but if we need stuff that's kind of outside the scope of that, and we always do, the answer is to roll your own extension. So this would be a custom module on your Drupal site that implements the right pieces to get itself into the Twig environment. And then from there you can use functions, filters, or anything else that your extension provides. So there's two basic parts to creating a Twig extension. We've got to define a service. This is an example from the Twig Tweak module. I'm not going to cover this super close here because we're going to go back to this stuff. And then we have to create a service class that provides the actual extension. So I believe, yep. So here we go. So when we provide these filters and functions, our extension will just provide a method called getFilters. It provides an array of filters. Same thing with functions. There's a getFunctions method, and it will provide an array of functions. All right. So that is actually most of the slides. So now we will get to the good part. Everybody came here to watch me write some code, I'm sure. So, like I mentioned, this is just a Drupal module, just like any other Drupal module you'd put in your site. I've done some of the basic scaffolding of it. We've got the info file, just like any other module. I've got an empty services file, so we need to add a service for our Twig extension. So this is just a service, just like any other service in Drupal. You have to give it a class. And then we have to give it a tag. So if we jump back to this other slide we were on earlier, we can see the syntax for adding the tag. This is tags, and then we give it an array of tags. So the important part here, when we're defining our service, to get Drupal to recognize this is a Twig extension, we just have to give it the right tag. So we'll just give the Twig extension tag, and Drupal will now know to pick that up and load it into its Twig environment. Okay. And then the other part of that was to add the actual class that we define here as our service. So we've got our the name of our class defined here. Got a class ready to go. So we need to add a couple things in here. Function. So get filters is the name for adding filters. And here we're just going to return an array of filters. With the simple filter. And for this demo, we're just going to do a little bit of a countdown that's going on. So we'll provide some filters and functions that take in dates and times, and we'll do a computation of the difference between those. So the first parameter is the name of the filter function that we'll use in our template, and then the second parameter can either be the name of a function, or in this case, we are going to reference a method on this class. So we will use this and render countdown. So to do our example, we're going to just give it one parameter for the end date. And we will, to format this, we're going to use Drupal's date formatter service. And this function will just simply return computation there. So we will do the formatter, the format diff from the current time to the end time. So this little bit of code here should be enough to actually get us able to use the countdown filter within our with any of the templates that get utilized within our Drupal site. So to show this, I'm going to enable the module. Actually got an error in my code here. So I was just trying to clear the cache right now, and the cache clear command did not work. All right, caches have been rebuilt. So we jump back in here. I've got an empty Drupal site here. We can throw in that filter into one of the templates now. I'm going to put it in the page template. This is just right in the Bartik theme, just so we can show what's going on here. So right above the page content, we're gonna do an H2. Say here's our countdown, and then we can pass it an end time. So let's do 5 p.m. to our countdown filter, and now when we go back and render our pages, it should show up in the page template. All right, and there we go. So there's a successful Twig extension implementation of a filter. So this is put right into our template. And we said 5 p.m., that is 2 hours and 59 minutes from now. And then we can use nearly the same code for that, to give ourselves a function in place of a filter. Just jump right in here. So this is going to be nearly the exact same as the getFilters method, except we're going to provide an array of functions. We'll call this one countdown as well. And we'll provide it the same array here, pointing at the render countdown method on the class here. And then to go ahead and give this just a little bit more functionality when we're using it as a function instead of the filter, we'll go ahead and add an optional parameter here on the end. And then now we've got this second value for the start and the end. I'll go ahead and plop this into the formatter. And then now in our templates, we should be able to use that as a function as well. So behind the scenes here, I'm just going to clear the cache again. And in our templates, instead of calling it with the syntax, now we can call it as a function. So you can say here now we're calling it as a function. So 2 hours and 56 minutes now. So if you remember, we put that second parameter into our function, so we can utilize that as well. We can just run right back to our template. We could say if we wanted to actually do this between I'm going to do 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. The same thing. Oh, get 0 seconds. So actually, it looks like something didn't quite work right with that. Are there any questions about any of the pieces of the extension that we've covered so far? All right. So I'm going to kick back into my slides here real quick. So keys to success when using your custom Twig extension is just because we have the ability to add all these things to our templates doesn't necessarily mean that we should. There's a few thoughts on how to do things right. To bounce some of this off of Brian a little while back. He had some good input on that. Really, you're going to want to use these functions and filters to eliminate the complex logic from your templates. No more complicated ifs, if-else's, different cases, things like that. You can put a lot of that right into your Twig extension. And also, one of the probably best uses of it is to use them as a wrapper or a pass-through to some functionality that exists somewhere else. So, for instance, we're using it to basically just pass the values off to the date formatting service. We're not writing a date formatting computation into our service or into our Twig extension. We're actually just passing it off to an existing service. If you have some piece of very custom functionality, you should probably put it in a service or someplace else where it can be utilized by various things, and then your Twig extension could be one of them. And then probably the golden rule of all of this is just don't go crazy with it. We just in a few minutes here, we're able to slap a Twig extension together, and we could basically lets us put PHP right into our Twig templates. That's great. Just make sure we use it wisely. Don't be putting database queries necessarily into your Twig extensions just because you can, things like that. But there's a lot of power there. There's a lot of ways to consolidate your code and use various functionality that's not available with the Twig functionality in general. And then wrapping up, here's the resources for the various things that I mentioned. The Twig extension is the actual class that we were extending. And then there's some information there provided for Drupal's Twig implementation and the contrib modules as well. Once again, I've got these slides are available on the Twin Cities Camp website, and I'll throw this code that we wrote, clean it up a little bit, and then throw it into a repo if anybody wants to be able to reference the code later. I'll put the link to that on the session as well. And once again, are there any questions? Yes?
Yeah, so it looks like you put the Twig extension in a contributed module. Could you put it in the .feed file of the theme? Is that separate?
I don't believe so, just for the recording. The question was, we put the Twig extension into a module. It was actually a custom module. It's not contributed. It's not something that we've pushed back to the community. But it's in a custom module. I believe anything that could provide a service could provide a Twig extension. I don't believe themes can provide services, but I could be wrong. Any other questions? All right, thanks for coming. Have a great camp.